Hey everybody, Coach Eric here with the Dynamic Cyclist team, and we have an incredible interview for you today with one of our Dynamic Cyclist affiliates. His name's Craig. Craig is a bike fitter in New Zealand. He's actually the owner of Auckland Bike Fit. And we talked about some of the common questions that he receives from his clients about the relationship between bike fitting and mobility. We talked about common injuries that cyclists run into, the pains that they experience, and most importantly, what we can do about those things. So it's a great conversation. I think you're going to love it. It doesn't matter what level of cyclist you are, there's something in this conversation for you. And we can't wait for you to hear it. If you haven't signed up for Dynamic Cyclists, if you're looking for a platform to supplement your on-the-bike training, we have everything to take care of you off the bike. Your stretching and mobility, your strength training, your injury prevention work, it's all there on the platform, available to you 24/7. So we hope to see you there, and we hope you love this conversation with Craig from Auckland Bike Fit.
I'm asking a bunch of questions to people regarding cycling problems, mobility, strength training. You've had quite a few of the same ones come up, which is why I really wanted to put this to you, because obviously coming from a bike fitter is one thing, but coming from guys like yourself who actually work with people on a daily basis for these kind of mobility issues, it's really important.
Oh, I totally agree. Well, and like we've talked about in the past, like they're very complementary services, right? So like people need the bike fitting service. We always recommend that people get a bike fit, wherever they are in their cycling journey before they start, tackling one thing or the other with their body, just because it's so fundamental to how their body is going to respond all the time that they have on the bike, right?
Exactly. So important, because the on-bike, as I was saying, a lot of people only ride bikes. They don't actually really think about the mobility or the strength training things. And average age of my clients are 35 to 65, and it's that age when the muscle mass starts dropping and certain issues, injuries start popping up. So it's just so important going into those later years, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Well, and like you said, when you get into that age, I'm 32. I almost said middle age. I don't want to put us in the middle age category. I don't know. Maybe we're middle age, I guess. I don't know. But, when you get into that kind of age range, like you said, like the rest of your activities start kind of falling away. You stop going to the gym. I mean, for some people, it's like it's the start of their fitness life. But for a lot of people, especially after like high school age, they're not a part of a team anymore. They're not doing like organized sports. It can be really hard in that stage of life to remain active in general, so people find cycling as like this outlet to keep themselves healthy. It's low impact. It's a great activity that people just fall in love with, and that's awesome. But if it's all you do, as I'm sure we'll get into, like if it's all you do, then you gotta, just like anything, you got a world of problems kind of lingering in the background that need to be addressed.
They just build up, don't they? As the age grows, the problems grow with it.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, well, I'm a bit older than you, so I'm 44 now. So I've noticed certain injuries. Well, I find as you get a bit older, the injuries that they'll come in the same way, but they take a little bit longer to completely go away.
Right. Well, and then the recovery too, or I guess it's probably what you're referencing. Just the recovery is like, you really start to notice as you age. It's like, man, I'm not quite bouncing back the same way as I used to, and you got a lot of other stressors in your life too, most probably like later in your life, right? So it's like you might not be sleeping as much, you might not be eating as well.
Work stress, all adds to it, doesn't it?
It just all adds to it. Like I was, the body doesn't really differentiate between stress, so it's just stress. Right? Like you have stress at work, in a relationship, and then you have stress from your training, and then you get an injury, and all of that starts to add up, and it's all coming in, and it's like you got to find a way to properly manage it.
Yeah, and I think the good thing now with obviously internet is the main thing, and YouTube, people actually understand a lot of that stuff now, whereas you're going back 10, 15 years ago, it was literally, I think, hardly any cyclist that I knew done strength training or gym. I mean, I've always asked what people do off the bike in terms of training, and it's really, I would say that since COVID, especially, there's a lot more people taking care of themselves off the bike now. You know, gym work, home gyms, just home calisthenic workouts, all that kind of thing.
Oh yeah, for sure. It definitely, that period of time was a big wake up call for people, just for a lot of reasons. Like, and their health was definitely one of the main focal points. And it was a time that a lot of people were getting into new activities, maybe a lot of, and you got to be by yourself, your distance from people, maybe you want to be outside of enclosed spaces or whatever. And so, yeah, it probably drove a lot of people to get into cycling. But then, yeah, anytime you pick up a new activity, it's like you don't fully understand all the accompaniments that are going to have to come, like in the maintenance side, so that you can continue to do that activity long term. It's when you're just getting into, a sport or something you're enthusiastic about, like cycling or running or any other sport. It's like it's all great and exciting up front because it feels good and it's new and it's like you love it, but everything has an effect, you know what I mean? And especially a repetitive movement like cycling, it just tends to wear down certain things and weaken certain things, strengthen other things. So you really gotta learn how to account for those things, right? And that's why both of us exist. Like we both do that for people.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm just going to say that actually with cycling, because you do build strength in certain areas. It's fantastic, isn't it? But then you lose strength in the areas you're not really working as much, upper body especially, isn't it? And yeah, obviously we'll get into a few of the questions. As I said, I've got like 10 questions from all my clients essentially. These are genuine questions, and a lot of them have come up more than once. I've kind of put them in as much of an order of importance as we can, really. But yeah. We'll get cracking on some of these.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, I've got more here. I've got them in a sheet here. I just want to read them so I get them word for word correct.
Okay.
But the first one here, and the number one, is obviously the hip flexors. So why do cyclists struggle with tight hip flexors in general, and what can we do to fix that?
Yeah, great question. I'm really interested to hear your perspective on all these questions too, by the way. I think we'll both really inform each other and anyone who decides to listen. Yeah, the hip flexors in particular are in a really tricky spot when you jump onto the bike, just because that hip, by way, like the position of your pedal and also the position of your torso, just being in kind of a bent over posture on the bike, the hip is kind of always in a semi-flexed position. It never really reaches full extension, so what does that mean for the hip flexors? The group of muscles that basically drive your knee up towards your chest. Those muscles are always in a semi-shortened position. So, and basically the body's response to that is like, okay, well, this guy, Craig, Eric, I mean, he's always got these muscles at this length. Like they're never kind of getting stretched past that length. This is the range of motion that he's always operating in. So I'm going to make him better at being in that position. That's kind of how your body is responding. If you look at it as a conversation, it's like, I'm telling my body, I want the hip flexors to be in a shortened position and do this movement thousands and thousands of times when I'm on the bike. And so my body's like, okay, great. Well, I'll just shorten up those muscles and kind of keep you in that position and make you really good at comfortable in that position. And the problem is, whenever this mechanism starts to take place, which is, basically anytime you practice any movement pattern over and over again, initially it's going to have some good returns because you're going to get better in that range of motion doing that movement, but too much exposure to that pattern and you start to create, what you would commonly term an imbalance, so you start to get very good at one range of motion, but if you're getting good at something, that means you're getting not good. You're getting worse at something else.
Exactly.
So I would say that's one of the main reasons why those muscles in particular, and you got to think too, like the activity of those muscles. So they kind of drive they do a lot of things. They stabilize the low back, the psoas, it attaches to all the lumbar vertebrae, helps stabilize the low back. It drives the knee up towards the chest, especially if you're clipped in on the pedals. Then, the second half of that pedal stroke, where you're actually actively, in many instances, you're driving that pedal up. So you're actually pulling up on the pedal. And you might even be doing that even if you're not clipped in, just to kind of help with the revolution of the pedal. So that too, that excessive activity, the excessive contraction of those muscles, when you contract the muscles, they also shorten as well. So you got a few things kind of working against you in that regard. And there's nothing to really counteract it on the bike, because apart from standing up and pedaling standing up, where you might get a little more range of motion in the hip, you're never really reaching fully back behind you and expressing the full length of those tissues.
Yes, agreed. And it's funny you say about pulling up, because you can pretty much challenge anyone to just sit on the bike and do these one-legged drills where you're just pulling up, and everyone will feel a little bit of tension on that hip flexor when you're doing that, just because of the position you're actually in when you're doing it, just pulling directly up, isn't it? It puts a lot of stress on it instantly.
For sure. And it's just the nature of cycling, like it's so repetitive, right? Like you're just doing the same thing over and over and over again. So it's like, it might be a small contraction, it might be not a very intense movement, but you got to think about the compound effect over time, the thousands, the hundreds of thousands of times that you do that movement. It's like those muscles are really, really getting worked. And especially if there's other imbalances in the body, like things that should be counteracting some of the negative effects of all that contraction, maybe some muscles in the core or your low back or all sorts of places throughout the body. And let alone the rest of your life, where that same mechanism might be taking place. Anytime you sit, for example, like you're also shortening your hip flexors. So if you work a desk job or you drive a lot, or you can start, that's right. Yeah, like you can start to see very quickly how this starts to become a web of problems very quickly if you're not doing something to kind of correct that. And I'm sure the positioning the position that you try to get people in on their bike is probably super important to that, so that this is not an exponential problem.
Yes, exactly. So you've got obviously bike geometries are one thing. So people, I will say bikes are made for people who are 18, 19, 20 years old, but the people that can afford them are usually in that 30 plus, 40 plus age bracket. So, and usually with different requirements for your riding. So having someone stretched out low on the front is never good for the hip flexors. Obviously we've got that thing that's come out now, the big trend, which is shorter cranks, which obviously helps you come over the top of the stroke, helps kind of reduce that impingement in there a little bit, which seems to be popular. But you do get that 50-50 balance here, where when a trend comes out, everyone jumps on it, and it is obviously a person by person case. It is an individual thing. So I see a 50-50 balance here with people coming in who've changed shorter cranks, love it. 50-50, 50% people coming in and don't like it. So it is really individual and down to your own needs and your own requirements.
Oh, yeah, no kidding. Like that. And that's why your service in particular is so important. That's why we say it's very hard for us to give too much, and not that we try to, it's just, we try to preface a lot of the materials that we put out, or when we used to write a lot of articles, we'd say like, hey, before you try addressing this issue and start making a bunch of changes in your body, like you really got to go see a professional fitter to see how that machine that you're on is working with your body, because it's just so individualized. You have your own body, and its proportions and everything is so unique that it's like it needs some personal attention.
Yeah, people are, everyone's different, are they? I've had people jump on bikes before now, and you can up their seat by, let's say, 2 centimeters, and they just don't feel any difference. You get people who are adjusted by 1 mil, and they're instantly aware of it.
Yeah, isn't that interesting too? Because you think about like the depending on the body, the difference that makes in a joint angle, or the difference that makes on the strain on a particular muscle. I mean, 1 millimeter doesn't sound like much, but especially for someone who's, well, I don't know, actually, who might be more sensitive to the adjustments, but
I think it's random. I mean, I've had guys who've been riding for years, and they're quite mute to their the issues and the things you change. They'll just roll with it. They don't really feel any difference. Their whole outlook is, I'll go out and riding and see how it feels. But you get other people who could be a brand new rider and you're adjusting tiny little increments and they're just aware of every minute change throughout the whole body. So you're aware of what goes on the shoulder when you stretch it out, or the extra strain on the triceps if you're trying to drop the front down, little things like that, which is great. From a fitter perspective, you get amazing feedback from someone with those kind of issues. You can really fine tune things a little bit better. So it's not always a bad thing.
Yeah. No, and you see the same thing with exercise in general. Like some people are just much more aware, I guess, of they have more kinesthetic awareness. They're more aware of where their body is in space and how, how maybe a different exercise affects something, or holding a position affects them, or, we're just different in that regard. Like you said, some people just I would imagine you see this from your side. Like some people just tolerate the stress of cycling, the position of cycling, better than other people.
100%. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there. That's really what it is. The tolerance is so different.
Yeah, it's so different, and it's it's unfair, but it's like all athletic activity is unfair in some sense. It's like all you have to do is look at the best in the world. You know what I mean? Like we all can't be like those people, but there's so much variance at every level of this sport and every other sport. It's like, and for something like that, it's like, man, my friend, or we're in a bike club and we all, we do the same thing, and we maybe even got the same bike, but like they're doing okay and I'm like not doing that good, or I'm feeling some pain. And it's like, yeah, man, like that's your body, like that's your situation, and it has to be addressed, individually.
And I put a few strength training plans through to people, which are very basic, and I obviously have a link to you guys on there as well. So if you want to go a bit further, but the one thing I always try to get people to do at home, and this is just basically the one, test the strength on left versus right, and two, just to try and build even strength between the two sides, because we do a lot of knee tracking with the 3D bike fitting we do, and you can instantly see an imbalance straight away with the knee tracking. You can see, one knee will kick out a bit more, one knee may kick in at the bottom of the stroke on the other side. So one thing I try to get every client who comes in is to put a little thing like at home lunges, pack lunges in there, stretch everything out as best you can. But it is really only it's a one kind of notch, isn't it? But there's a lot more things you need to tick off, especially for certain people at a later age.
Oh, definitely. Well, and that whole, unilateral strength, like the strength differences between the sides, or maybe, a tightness between one side or the other. We really try to build that into our stretching mobility sessions and our strength training sessions, where you'll find a lot of our work is unilateral, meaning you're working one side and then you're working in the other side. And there's some double leg work mixed in there, but it's a lot of like one side at a time to kind of expose those weaknesses and say, hey, this, you can probably feel this is a little bit harder on one side. This side needs to work a little bit more. And, you can kind of start to learn about your own body and address those things, because it's going to be different. It'll be different just based on your handedness, just what hand you use to write and to, whatever else, swing a tennis racket. Like all those things have an effect on what your body might need.
This is why we have 2 arms and 2 legs. They're designed all to work together, aren't they? That's right. You jump on a bike, it's a little bit alien to the human body, really.
That's actually a really good point, because you're doing this thing that requires like so much symmetry, whereas in your life, you develop patterns that become natural to you so that you can save energy, so that you don't have to think about them. Like a super easy example is like the way you cross your arms. Like if you cross your arms, you'll just naturally cross your arms one way or the other, and you don't even think about it. But if you cross it the other way, it feels very awkward and like uncomfortable, because your brain has figured that out. Like it figured out how to cross its arms, doesn't have to think about it anymore. Just do it this way, and then we can move on to other things. It's the same with exercise. That point that you just made is actually such an interesting one. Like the bike is this symmetrical activity where you're using kind of both sides evenly, whereas the rest of your life, it's often not like that. Like you have one hand that you write with, you have one leg that you kicked with in soccer. If you work at a checkout, there's one way you turn. You know what I mean? Like there's just
yeah. And the more you think about it, if you were thinking about this for 10 minutes, you would come out with so many scenarios, wouldn't you, where you do this?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it would just be riddled throughout your life, and you'd see, oh, geez, this is more complicated, puzzle than I thought it was going to be, because that's just an endless story in everybody's life.
It really is. I mean, with the hip flex, I mean, technically we've got I might jump down a little bit here, because I think talking about the hip flexors and going straight into knees is probably the best one, with the with the IT band attaching, things like this. Probably one of the other things. So I mean, knee pain, inside and outside knee pain. How would you guys generally approach this if someone came to you with that kind of issue when cycling?
Yeah, well, there's a couple ways that you can approach it. See, the thing about cycling is kind of speaking to what we were just talking about. Like, the thing about cycling is your body is using the muscles in the lower leg. Like, you're using your muscles in a kind of a different way than you're usually using them. Like, for example, if you were walking or if you were running, if you were kind of operating off the bike in free space, there's a bit of distortion or disruption is maybe a better word of the muscle activity. And that can start, like, for example, in cycling, like the quads are getting hammered big time when you're on the bike constantly, right? And the glutes and the hamstrings are acting in a way that is a little bit unnatural, just by the fact that you're seated on the bike. And this will pertain to some of the other points that I'm sure we'll talk about, especially like with low back pain. But just the fact that it's a weird activity, because you're sitting, but you're also exercising. It's a bizarre thing for your body to deal with. And this can, when you look at if there's some disruption up in the hips, whenever there's disruption anywhere, it's going to trickle kind of up and down from that area and cause different issues, right? So, just the fact that you're sitting on the bike, that makes it very hard to get good glute engagement, good glute activity. The glutes are working, there's some activity, but they're definitely not working to their capacity to help you extend the hip in particular. And then in terms of stabilizing the hip, side to side, it doesn't really have to work that much at all, because you're sitting on the bike. So
the knees are down from that, right? So when the hips go out, the knees go out with it.
That's just it. And so you're disrupting that activity. So then think about if you also run, which a lot of cyclists do as kind of a cross training activity, or even just walking. It's like the activity in your hips that needs to occur, the muscles that need to turn on to stabilize the pelvis. You've just practiced a lot of muscle activity in the leg where certain big muscle groups were working, like in your quadriceps, but the smaller hip stabilizers weren't working at all. And you've created this kind of distorted muscle activity that is not going to transfer very well to the rest of your life. So you've strengthened up, I keep using the quads, but they're just kind of the most active group. Like you've strengthened up the quads way out of proportion to the other muscles in your legs. And it's really disrupted the coordination and the timing of all those muscles, which is, that's one of the quickest ways to get injured. If you practice bad coordination, bad timing through isolated activity, which, as weird as it is, cycling does have some elements of that, just because you're exercising muscles in a way that's not totally natural.
Yeah, that makes sense. You're right. Yeah, we were talking about it earlier, weren't we? It is an unnatural thing, cycling. Walking is natural, running is natural. We've done it for thousands of years, right? Yeah. But the bike is pretty new.
Right. Yeah, and so then you have those issues up in the hips, in particular, and like you said, now that you're putting so much strain on this knee joint by way of these huge, powerful muscles, and it's like it's hard for them not to kind of take the brunt of maybe that instability further up the chain, and just kind of the awkward muscle activity in general. And you can get some issues, like you said, like maybe some tightness in the IT band, maybe overactivity in kind of those medial quadricep muscles. And it just starts pulling on things weird and develop a lot of stiffness and tightness in these areas as well. That can start pulling on tendons and all sorts of other tissues. And before you know it, you got knee pain and you're not sure why.
And yeah, and obviously during a bike that you can we can help eliminate some of these things. Alignment is obviously one of the main things, but cleat wedging, I'm sure you're aware of. I do notice though sometimes people overcompensate with cleat wedging. So having your feet like this naturally, but then having the ability to pull back around without really causing any problems with the knees. You don't always need to cleat wedge when you have that flexibility in the ankle and the foot, but more often than not, you'll hold people like this and you'll try to move their foot and it's completely locked out. And of course, when that clips in, your knees kind of kick in with it. You put excess stress through the IT band into the hip flexor, and that's all she wrote.
That's such an interesting point. Like whenever you lock, it makes me think of, because I come mainly from a exercise and training background, and it's kind of got I put an overlay onto the cycling world. And when I look at people on their bikes and how they move, and that point that you just made there makes me think of when you go into a gym and you work on a machine, like you lock yourself into this fixed range of motion, which is not designed for your body. It's basically, especially if you're a woman, it's basically designed for the average male adult body. But even besides that, it's just you're locked into this range of motion. And if the goal is whatever, if it's a chest press machine, and if you were to have two dumbbells, you'd have a nice smooth range of motion. Maybe your elbows would be coming out about 45 degrees. Yeah, and exactly. Everything would be working to kind of help you do that movement. But when you're locked into that range of motion and it's just kind of on a track, you can push on that thing as hard as you want, and it will allow you to do a bunch of awkward things to generate more force and move this apparatus from here to here that you wouldn't be able to do if you were handling a free weight. So you might be pushing really hard. You might be able to flare your elbows out. You can kind of do all sorts of awkward things to push more weight. But you wouldn't at all be able to do that if you had a free weight. You would drop it. You'd hurt yourself, or you know what I mean? So it's like that thing that you just talked about, I can imagine in your field has got to be so important when you're making, just like how careful you have to be with making an adjustment on somebody, because you're literally locking them into certain positions, certain parts of the body in certain positions.
Obviously cleats have some float, but they don't always have a lot of float, and you've got a very minimal movement in there. So no, you're right. It's a really good comparison actually with the weights, because you're right. You are literally locking someone into a machine, aren't you?
Yeah. And same thing as the previous, topic, where it's like, now you're working something. I don't know if this quite applies to the cleat example, but like the machine example, you're now isolating muscles, and you're able to basically get stronger in ranges of motion by using your muscles in a way that they can't actually replicate in the real world. Yes. So because you don't operate on a machine in the real world, just like you don't operate on a bike like in the rest of your life, right? So it's a tricky problem.
Yeah, yeah, it is. It is one, I would say, the top three. Obviously, the hips, and we have the knees, and the other one we do have, which is very common. I would say this is the number one problem. This isn't the number one question I got. This is, I would say, from all the fits over the years, the number one problem, and that is the back pain. So I would say I don't always look at it as just back pain. I kind of put this into lower back pain, upper back pain, traps, shoulders, and even the numb hands come into this, because generally, because you're too stretched out or you're too low, but you do get it now and again where even when someone's in the right position, they still get this lower back pain. And where would that, from your point of view, I guess it might come from posture, obviously issues when you're younger, things like this. It could be just a natural progression of your body, age. But what would you say would be the way to combat this if someone's suffering from this? They had their fit check, everything's good, but they're still getting this lower back pain.
Yeah, lower back pain. I mean, lower back pain is so common, and it's so chronic in people too. Like some people, a lot of people, they've had lower back pain for years. I mean, whether they're a cyclist or not, actually, it's actually outside of cycling, it's the number one musculoskeletal problem in the world, quote unquote low back pain. And that term can be a bit ambiguous because it's like, okay, well, I got pain in my back, but like, what's the problem? Well, it could be a million things, right? But when you look at cycling, I mean, speaking to the rest of our conversation that we've had so far, there's a lot of contributing factors on the bike that can cause somebody to have low back pain. And if you already have low back pain coming into cycling, then you're in for a bit of trouble as well, because it's definitely not going to be a resolution for your back pain. If anything, it's going to exacerbate it. And there really needs to be some sort of supplemental and corrective measures to kind of help combat against it. So I'll kind of answer it in two parts, if that's okay. Like some of the reasons why it happens, and then some of the things to do about it. I mean, first of all, again, you're seated on the bike, so that immediately increases the pressure on your low back. When you fold forward, when you fold your torso forward, that increases the pressure even more on the low back. So you've already got this sustained kind of intensified pressure on the lower back. So that's one of the first things that's happening. One of the first things we started on, the hip flexor activity and the tightness in the hip flexors. So when your main hip flexors, your psoas major, that muscle, it really bridges the upper and lower body, and it attaches to all your lumbar vertebrae. And so why is that important? It's like, well, whatever you do to those hip flexors or whatever they're doing, they're going to have a major impact on the lower back. So they can be major stabilizers of the low back, but they can also be the cause of a lot of low back dysfunction. Because you have to think, we talk about this problem a lot on Dynamic Cyclists, when those, because it's so common with cyclists, this exact problem where those hip flexors shorten up, and when they shorten up, they pull on those lumbar vertebrae, and they kind of pull you into further extension. So they pull you into what's called a lordosis, so like an excessive low back curve. Yes. And you do that, I'm sure you see this in people all the time because you're actually looking at their bodies in person. Like,
I could show you all these side profiles, and you
I can't imagine. Yeah, I can't imagine. And it's like, you pull somebody into that position that also tilts the pelvis forward at the same time when you do that. And it also, like when you go into that lordosis, you're also at the same time, so you're arching your back, but you're also kind of distending your abdomen. And what does that do? That will disengage the core muscles at the same time, just because they're being stretched. And so, I mean, this is a major problem because the core muscles in your core are there to kind of counteract that hip flexor action. So some of your core muscles are designed to help tilt the pelvis backwards and kind of counter the pull of the hip flexors. You actually see this in exercise all the time. Like if you were ever, you or anyone watching, if you ever do sit-ups or leg raises like on the ground, and if you ever feel low back pain when you're doing that, or your lower back lifts up off the ground when you're doing that, that's because that's your hip flexors, which are trying to either, they're trying to lift your torso up off the ground in a sit-up, or they're trying to lift your legs up off the ground when you're doing a leg raise. When the hip flexors contract, they're pulling that lower back up off the ground. And if your core isn't strong enough to work against that motion, keep your pelvis tilted backwards. That's why you'll see in our programs, you always hear the coach say, keep your lower back flat on the ground, keep it pressed into the ground, don't let it lift up, things like that. Because that's really what you're trying to get the core to work against the action of those hip flexors. So all that to give context to what might be happening on the bike, where, you're kind of in this already, you're in this seated, folded forward position. The hip flexors are working like crazy. And if you haven't developed, the tone in your core muscles to kind of maintain a good posture on the bike, and your low back is the subject of just this repetitive hip flexor strain, then you could be getting this really kind of nasty action on the low back that can really wear things out over time. But yeah, the core piece is a big one that I know everyone hears all the time. Like, you got a weak core or you got a problem in your core, and it can be very hard to, kind of define like, okay, I got a weak core, but like, why? Like, what's the problem? What is it doing? And And this is one of the things, like with cycling, is the core. It's very hard to get adequate core activity just by cycling.
Yes.
Because
and that might be true, actually, because the next question, I mean, I've jumped around a bit on these only because I think some of the things we're talking about actually tie in really nicely to the next one. The big one on here, obviously, I'll jump on this quickly now, is obviously the core strength. We were just talking about, obviously you're touching on it now, and how important it is on the bike. And the one thing I would say to people is, I guess when someone comes with a bike fit, the question I would have is, someone says to me, oh, if I get more flexible, will I be able to go lower or longer? And the reality is, if someone who's not flexible just drops their arms down, their hands are pretty much going to reach down to almost where the axles are. So in terms of flexibility itself, it doesn't really affect how they sit on the bike, but how long they can hold that position. That's where the core strength comes in.
Yeah.
And that's for a lot of people. So,
oh, for sure. Yeah, no, that's a great point. Like, and you have to think too, like, when you look at somebody cycling, or you're on the bike yourself and you're kind of assessing yourself and maybe wondering where a problem that you're having might be originating from. There is kind of a saying in exercise science that everything emanates from the core. And it's a very common saying that you'll hear out there in the kinesiology world or the physical rehab world. It's really true. Like, in the deep muscles of the core, like the deepest muscles, there's a muscle called your transversus abdominis. It's your deepest muscle. It's almost like they call it your nature's weight belt. People wear a weight belt in the gym to kind of support their back when they're lifting. Your body has one of those built in. It's the muscle that kind of, if you draw your belly button in, like to put on a tight pair of pants or something, that's your transversus abdominis working.
The one you can only target with a certain type of exercise, isn't it?
Right. Yeah. It's like, well, and just to have the awareness of activating that muscle. It's like, most people don't think of like pulling their belly button in when they think about core. They think of, kind of making their stomach really hard, flexing like their abs, you know what I mean? And it's like, there's much more to this part of your body than just, the washboard, right?
It's called a muscle group for a reason, isn't it?
Exactly. There's a lot of muscles in there with a lot of really complex functions. And yeah, like, if that muscle, I mean, just as an example, that's if that muscle's working properly, I've seen studies years ago where if that muscle's working properly, then something like 30 to 40 milliseconds before you move an extremity. So you go to move your arm or you go to move your leg, if that muscle's healthy and functioning properly, it'll actually fire 30 to 40 milliseconds before you move an extremity. So everything literally emanates from the core. It's not just a saying. It's not just like a fun way of looking at things. It's like, no, you have to think like these extremities that you're pumping the pedals with, that you're supporting yourself on the handlebars and everything, are attached to the middle part of your body, your midsection, your torso, your quote unquote core. And so if that is not, if you're not built on a good foundation from the center outwards, then you're kind of, it's a recipe for dysfunction at some point in time.
Yeah, so true. And obviously with that core being stable, it means the hips are going to be more stable, the shoulders are going to be more stable. It literally works out from both sides, doesn't it?
Yeah, it literally emanates out from the core. It just
the knees as well at the end of it.
Yeah, exactly. It comes out in all directions, and everything will work better if you have a solid foundation. Now, with that being said, you have to learn how to train it properly, and you have to learn how to give it enough variety to satisfy all the functions that it's actually capable of. Because just being on the bike, this is one of the issues, just cycling, your core has to work in several different ways, but it's not at all expressing its entire range of functions. It's not twisting, it's not stabilizing, it's not really bending side to side that much. You think about somebody like a gymnast or like a dancer, somebody who's just extremely athletic in all these unbelievably complex ways. Not that a cyclist isn't in their own way, but it's just they're more expressing the full function of their body compared to a cyclist, where you start to get very specialized very quick at this one, motion and a few iterations, right?
That's where but bike position comes in for as well, because obviously if you're in a position where you're, for example, the bike's too big, too long, your arms are locked out, your shoulder, all the weight goes essentially through, I call it the horseshoe. So it's like basically like a horseshoe, all the stress goes through here, the traps in the arms, people get numb hands on the bike. And you obviously get the advice out there to drop the shoulders, bend the arms, which is fantastic, but you're only as good as the position you're in. That's the problem. So if you're stretched on the bike, you're going to be able to bend your arms very well for a few seconds, and then it's just going to go straight to locked out again. And then you can move your hands back on the bars, but then you're away from the brakes, and it's a safety issue, things like this. So that is one of the things I find in here, is trying to get people to just keep that very slight natural. When I say natural, a natural reach to the bar. We could reach the bar from way further back, but you are going to lock all those muscles out. You're going to activate literally everything in this area. So been in a position where you can naturally bend the arms, and it's almost like if you drop someone on the bike, that's just the position they go into. There's no extra movements, and I will literally send you a couple of after we jump off the chat. I'll send you some of the before and afters I've got, and you'll see such a difference between. There's a very slight change in position and a massive change to how the body sits on the bike.
Oh yeah, I'd love to see that. I really like what you said. Like it really matters the position that you're actually in. Like it's not like you can give people cues, but at the end of the day, they're in a certain position that their body has to deal with one way or the other. So, it makes me think of like the definition of posture in general. This is just the one that I've remembered over the years. I think it was from Moshe. There's a very interesting character named Moshe Feldenkrais. He was an Israeli engineer and physicist, and he developed this whole method of movement called the Feldenkrais method. Very, very interesting guy. And I remember his definition of posture is the position from which movement begins and ends. So that's what posture is. It's like wherever you are, and then wherever movement begins, and then wherever it ends, that's your posture. And you as a bike fitter are adjusting people's cycling posture, right?
Yes.
Like that's what you're creating for them, and that's what you're helping them find is their cycling posture. Because just like you said, that's the position that they need to work in. And I would imagine you're trying to find the most efficient and effective position for that body.
That's a really good point. And posture is, again, this is going on really well with our questions, because we obviously go on posture as well here. So a posture, I guess this isn't only really about posture on the bike, but this is also about posture off the bike. How important is your general posture? Obviously, how you walk around, how you sit, a desk, things like this. How important is that in relation to the cycling, keeping a good posture off the bike as well?
Yeah, how important is it off the bike, and how important is it to transfer on the bike? I mean, you just have to think like head position is a great example that a lot of people can relate to, especially nowadays. So you think about the posture of somebody's, cervical spine, their neck, and their head, kind of where their head sits on top of their shoulders. And, there's a term floating around nowadays like text neck, like your head, it's basically forward head posture, right? Like and pretty much everybody has it. Like if you put somebody on a plumb line, you gave them like a straight reference point, you'd be amazed how people, you probably do this in your own way on the bike. Like, I used to do it all the time in clinic, where you put someone actually on it's just a straight line hanging off the ceiling, and you put their body against that reference point, and you'll see you put anybody on that line, and you start to see all sorts of crazy things pop out at you that you don't really catch unless you have that straight reference point.
And that top third is most likely on one side, and the rest of the body. Yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure, man. Like people are all crooked and twisted, and like you just got no idea until you put them on that line, and it's so.
Well, I'm not doing it now, okay? So.
yeah, no, for sure. And like the head in particular, people's heads, nowadays they tend to drift forward just because we're doing a lot of sitting. Yeah, we're on our phones a lot. We're on our laptops a lot. And So, I mean, this is actually very relevant to cycling, because when you're bent over on the bike, when you're seated on the bike, the head tends to drift even further forward. It's just the nature of the position. And it's something that you have to deal with on the bike. So this is a case where, how does your everyday posture kind of lay over onto your cycling posture? Well, if you already have, forward head posture, and you haven't kind of corrected it to be just a little more upright, a little more in line with the rest of your body, and then you're doing a lot of cycling on top of that, you're just going to make that problem even worse. And there's so many negative, something that people don't realize is how heavy their head actually is. Your head is, on average, if I remember correctly, it's something like 8% of your body weight. So, just make it simple. If you're 100-pound person, that's 8 pounds. But for every inch that you drift forward, I think it's every inch or close to an inch, every inch that your head drifts forward, the actual weight of your head is doubles.
Yeah.
The weight on your cervical spine, the stress on your cervical spine, it doubles for every inch forward that head moves. And it's not uncommon at all for people to, be 2-3 inches forward from their shoulders.
And the head just and more, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And then, you wonder why maybe your neck's always tense, or why you have headaches, or some sort of numbness shooting down your arm or something. It's like then you get on the bike and you add that, like you were just explaining. I really liked that, analogy of like the horseshoe. Like, you got all that pressure kind of circulating through you, and the feedback from the handlebars and your head drifting forward. And this is just one part of the body.
Yeah.
So it's like, but it's a very sensitive part of the body, right? So that, I would say, it's very important, the posture that you carry outside the sport, because you're not going to make anything better posture wise on the bike.
No,
I don't think that's that controversial to say.
Yeah, I agree. Because you're locked in, whatever position you're locked into. That could be a good position, it could be a bad position, it could be a good fitting bike or a bad fitting bike.
Yeah, that's right. And it's just, you just give yourself a better chance of, there's less chance of breakdown. Like, if you think about posture, like, what's the quote unquote ideal posture? Well, that can be a little bit hard to define, but it's, in one sense, it's really, okay, what's the best position for all the joints and everything to be in, to where there's the least wear, there's the most efficient and effective movement, the best starting point, basically. And so if you're you're also, you're talking about balance, like, throughout the body. If you have good posture, then that's kind of synonymous with, well, this person's pretty well balanced.
Yes.
And so the more balanced you are and the better position that you're in, the more you're going to be able to tolerate generally when it comes to exertion.
It's so true. And I think with these questions as well, it's quite apparent when you start working down through them, how all these things are connected. And we've obviously we've gone through literally everything on here, and it's all led on to the next one.
Yeah, just naturally. And it's, the more you listen to a conversation like this, you start to look at yourself on the bike, and your own body. You look at your friends, or if you're in a profession like ours where you're looking at other people all the time, you start to see, like, these problems that people experience in this sport, in this field, this industry. They all kind of revolve around certain things. They have, like, there's breadcrumbs everywhere of, like, oh, this might be. That's why I always tell people, like, I'll do these one-on-one sessions with people from Dynamic Cyclists. They can book, like, a one-on-one session if they need a little bit more personalized help. And it's not uncommon at all. It's quite sad, actually, sometimes. Like, and this is just in general, people have issues, pain, chronic injuries that keep popping up. And they've run through the gamut of practitioners, and they've gotten all these opinions, but nothing's really working. And they start to feel hopeless. Like, oh, I bet you see it in your field of work too. People are just like, man,
give up.
Yeah, it's like,
Nancy, yeah, I get so many people coming for, this is my last attempt, this is my last this, and if I can't fix it this time, I'll sell the bike. And then when they sell the bike, that's probably the one thing that's keeping the weight off, keeping them healthy. And when you get rid of that, everything else pretty much, unless you're playing golf, is going to be much higher impact than obviously.
For sure. For sure. Well, and yeah, think about how that picture, like that's a sad picture where it's like you said, it's like, because now this thing that I enjoyed basically is hurting me. You know what I mean? And what am I to do? Like, how am I supposed to, this is actually something I like to do. I want to keep doing it. But every time I do it, I'm having an issue or I'm having pain. I mean, this is why we created our products. I mean, it's probably part of why you do your service as well. It's just like you want to get people out of that pain and you want them to enjoy the activity that they love doing. And
that's what it's about, isn't it? That's just,
that's all it's about. And so yeah, I would just put it out there that like there's just always something you can do. You just need someone with the right perspective, a different perspective, perhaps somebody with a little bit of a zoomed out view of the situation who can look at your body and what's going on from a detached perspective and kind of look at it. And oftentimes it's like, hey, I might not know everything that's going on, but I can definitely see we could work on this, we could work on this, we could work on this, because these things are related, these two things are related. We can just start somewhere and start figuring it out, Yeah.
Brilliant. No, that's good stuff, Eric. Let's have a look. There's another one I probably want to touch on. I mean, we haven't really touched on this one, but it will be related, obviously, and that's the hamstrings, because we get so many people with hamstrings. It's really common. It's not one of those things like the lower back where it gets to the point where people can, it can really affect your cycling to the point where you need to stop. But it is a really common niggle that's just so many people have. So I'd really love to get your insight into the hamstrings and any kind of exercises you can kind of aim for, things like that.
Yeah. No, the hamstrings on a cyclist, this is a very interesting topic for me, which might be a weird setup. People like, I didn't know this guy was going to be so enthusiastic about hamstrings, but really it's the hamstrings are, a lot of things can affect hamstring, stiffness, hamstring pain, any kind of up and down, like at the origin and attachment points, like up into the buttocks, any sort of sciatic problems, behind the knee, all the places that the hamstrings kind of reach down into and attach and affect and have action on. See, one of the first things that I want to say is that a lot of times hamstring tightness is not just because how do I say this? It's not just because the hamstring muscles are short. It can often be because the hamstrings are weak. So this is one thing that a lot of people don't realize about tight muscles, and this is not always the case. This isn't always the case for the hamstrings, but it does kind of relate to that past problem we were talking about with, like, if the hip flexors are very tight and they're pulling on that lower back and creating that kind of lordotic posture, and then that is tilting the pelvis forward. Well, if you tilt the pelvis forward and it's sitting chronically in that tilted position, then you're also chronically stretching the hamstrings.
Yeah.
So the hamstrings are actually sitting in a chronically stretched position. And what does that do? That makes them very weak. And especially if there's no corrective work being done to kind of address that and return them to their normal resting length. If they're constantly being pulled on, then one of the responses from the body might be to basically try to tighten up those hamstrings, not because the hamstrings need to be stretched. Like, it's going to feel like the hamstrings need to be stretched, but if you were to stretch them in this scenario, you would actually be making the problem worse. You would actually be facilitating the tilt of that pelvis and the tightness of the hip flexors. You would be playing right into that problem.
Really good point. And I guess it also goes back to what you're saying with the quad activation as well, doesn't it? If you're not activating your glutes, you're not activating your hamstrings, you're overloading the quads, and you develop these bad habits where you get very quad dominant on the bike.
Oh yeah, 100%. Like, and that makes me think of another problem too with the hamstrings, where So there's this phenomenon called synergistic dominance. It's kind of a fancy term, but it basically means that a prime mover. So in this case, it directly relates to the hamstrings and cyclists. So the prime hip extensor, for example, is your gluteus maximus, like your big muscle, right? And the problem on the bike is that muscle, your main big glute muscle, is not getting a ton of activity, very low levels of activity. It's active, but it's getting very low levels of activity. It's not very intense activity, which is that muscle in particular thrives on very intense high load activity, like in a heavy squat or a heavy deadlift, which is not at all the same as a pedal stroke. But so it's kind of your main hip extensor, and your hips are extending all the time, at least semi-extending all the time on the bike. Whenever you drive your foot down, you're extending that hip. But because the level of activity is so low, the intensity is so low, and because the function of your hip extensor, your gluteus maximus, is a little bit inhibited just by the fact that you're sitting on the bike, you're not extending your leg all the way. You get this phenomenon called synergistic dominance, which basically means the prime mover is inhibited for one reason or the other. And so a synergist, meaning, something that works in concert with that muscle, so it has a similar function, in this case, the hamstrings. I hope this isn't too complicated. I feel like I'm making it sound very complicated, but so your hamstrings, their primary function is to flex the knee. So bring your heel up towards your bum, basically.
I would call it the bicep of the leg, because that's pretty much
exactly. Yeah, one of the hamstrings is actually called your biceps femoris, right? So it literally is the biceps of the leg, and so its primary function is to drive that heel up towards the bum, but its secondary function is to extend the hip. And so this synergistic dominance basically means the prime mover is inhibited, so the glutes are not fully functional, in this case because we're riding a bike. So the body will recruit a synergist, a secondary mover, the hamstrings, to extend the hip as a way of conserving energy, so not trying to recruit the gluteus maximus, but also it's just the thing most capable for the job in that scenario. And so the hamstrings are actually getting excessive. You can go look at studies of muscle activity of a cyclist where, they put all sorts of electrodes on a cyclist and look at the muscle activity. You'll see the hamstrings get a lot of activity while someone is riding the bike. And it's because of this mechanism. And so it's very odd because the hamstrings are getting actually quite a bit of activity, but in their secondary function, a function that they're not designed primarily to be doing. For example, if you were walking or running, then you might get more activity from the glutes, for example. But that's another reason why the hamstrings might be getting aggravated or stiff or some other sensation that you might be feeling in those hamstrings. It's because the function is kind of, they're taking over the function of a bigger muscle for the reasons that I just described, basically.
It's so true, because I mean, when I kind of use the comparison with the bicep, you can kind of use it with the whole arm there, can't you? Because obviously you can say the quad is very similar to what the your tricep is, things like this, So when you try to lift, try and lift something on your bicep, you can never lift what you can lift on the tricep, and the same obviously with the quad and the hamstrings. I think it's important when people understand the use of the particular muscle and obviously the strength of a particular muscle. You wouldn't want to put as much of your weight possible through your hamstring, because that's going to cause a few little problems and injuries, almost guaranteed. And obviously we can go into triathletes here as well, can't we? That's a whole different thing. People overloading the quads and not using the hamstring at all, overusing the hamstring. So that is why position on the bike for a triathlon is really important, because the hamstring is one of the most common problems when they jump onto the run.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and too, if you don't have supplementary training that kind of addresses these problems, then the quad dominance, like you mentioned, like these things are just going to get worse if you just continue to cycle. There needs to be something kind of outside of cycling that corrects. Honestly, a workout regimen for any athlete participating in any sport, their strength training, their training in the gym or otherwise, really the first goal of that training is to prevent injury. That's the number one goal, whether you think it is or not. It just is, like, because if you're injured, nothing else matters. Like, if you're in pain, if you can't do your sport, nothing else matters. So it's really there. It should be designed in a way that, like, okay, I know what sport I'm doing. I know what positions I'm in and the problems that come with it. So my training should be designed around accounting for those things first, and then, perhaps optimizing performance after that. Yeah.
Very, very good. Good stuff. That was really informative, Eric. Thank you. That was great.
Thank you.
More. I mean, some of these will actually obviously translate into the same one. So obviously hamstrings, glutes, things like this. Now, I guess the one thing which I guess this would be about home training, any basic stuff which people can do at home, just the general run-of-the-mill basic exercises people can do at home that will just kind of help their cycling.
Yeah. So you can do a lot from home with very little equipment. I mean, that's honestly why we designed Dynamic Cyclist. It's just at home, very little equipment, follow along on the screen. It's designed for cyclists. So you don't have to think about it. It's just if you're doing a stretching and mobility session, if you're doing a strength training session, kind of built into those routines are movements and exercises that are designed in such a way to account for the common problems that cyclists have. So, you just need to become aware of, okay, what's kind of getting overworked, what's kind of getting underworked. I mean, we've talked about a lot of those things throughout the course of this conversation, right? It's like, we know the quads and the hip flexors are being shortened and worked a lot, right? To the detriment, I guess, of the muscles on the back of the leg, the hamstrings and the glutes are not getting quite as much work. So training those muscles in your workout routines, kind of activating those muscles, doing some single leg work where your hip has to stabilize itself, to kind of counter all that stability that you get from sitting on the saddle and supporting yourself on the handlebars. The upper body is obviously not getting much work while you're riding a bike. So addressing the upper body, the front and back and the arms, and making sure that you're taken care of there. And then working on your core. It's kind of a difficult question to answer, just that it's like you want to know, where am I lacking through my sport? And then how do I account for that outside of my sport in my workout routine? You don't need much time if you do the right things.
Yeah.
So it's a matter of kind of picking and choosing exercises based on the amount of time, the amount of equipment that you have, to kind of address those areas. So
that's a good point. I guess also with the exercises too, I always think it's beneficial if you know somebody who obviously goes to the gym, has been working out a while, almost getting them to run through these exercises with you first time. Because I feel people who essentially just ride and haven't really spent much time in the gym or doing any kind of off the bike training, the technique is so important that you don't obviously make things worse when you're trying to make things better.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that used to be my whole job back in the day. I mean, it used to be in gyms working with clients one-on-one. And it's like, when you see people come in, whether they're a cyclist or otherwise, you see them come in and you're bringing your experience into the gym, whatever that experience is, and like, you might not think you have any experience, but you've been moving in one way or the other your whole life, right? And so that is going to transfer itself over to any movement that you do in the gym. And especially if you haven't exposed yourself to many movements and exercises in the past, say, you take this example where somebody has mostly just cycled. It's like, well, you might consider yourself active and athletic, and you very well might be to some degree, but it doesn't mean you're active and athletic in, when all of a sudden you're doing different types of gym movements. You're doing movements that you're not used to doing. you're putting loads through your body that you're not used to experiencing on the bike. It's just different, right? So absolutely, if you know somebody who is a little more experienced working out, that's a great way to do it. If you feel so inclined to hire a trainer to get some actual in-person professional instruction to kind of help you along, or if you decide to go with a program like ours where you have a coach digitally kind of instructing you how to do a specific movement and showing you how such and such exercise should be done, it's you got to bridge that gap one way or the other and kind of start learning, okay, how do I get involved with this world?
And having that app in front of you that you can literally follow, you can't really beat that, can you? In terms of the accuracy and getting the movements correct.
Yeah, well, and especially if you're very much focused on cycling, like if that's your sport, then it's going to be hard to find another program that's designed for a person just like you. Like if you want to account for all the things that we've talked about today, and getting a service like yours from someone like you, a professional in that field, is number one. And then number two, if you want, strength training, stretching and mobility, things designed to account for this whole conversation, for problems that, you might be experiencing in your body, that's exactly why we made it.
Yeah, fantastic. Good stuff.
Yeah.
No, I really appreciate the chat today, Eric. It's been amazing. I think it'll be really beneficial to both of our clients as well.
Yeah, likewise, man. I really appreciated your insight and perspective. I love hearing about that world. Like we said at the beginning, it's such a complementary world, and we're just both trying to serve these people who love this sport. And I know that's why we're both here. And so, it's been a lot of fun, man.
It's great. I mean, today we're all driving down the same road, aren't we? So it's
that's right.
Yeah, that's great. No, I really appreciate it. And we'll look forward to doing a few more of these soon, I think.
Yeah, let's do that. I would love that.
Awesome, Eric.
Okay. Well, you take care, man.
See you, bud. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Join thousands of cyclists and ride pain-free with daily stretching, strength training, and injury prevention programs designed for cyclists. Download the Dynamic Cyclist app or click the link below to get started with a 7-day free trial. Subscribe to our channel to keep up to date with more mobility and strength tips to keep you pain-free.